Welcome to Ladies in Production Podcast, where we talk about animation and VFX production through the female lens.
I guess the reason why we've gathered today is to talk about a certain specific topic that I think everybody's run into, and that is the topic of big egos in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to find out from you guys, and it doesn't have to be your craziest big ego story, but one that you wanted to share, just to share your experiences with big egos. And, you know, also I wanted to discuss a little bit about the difference between a big ego and just being arrogant.
That's good.
Because sometimes an ego doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Oh. I agree with that. Because I think about just generally most people that are in leadership and most people that I do look up to, they do have to be confident. They have to exude this confidence about them, and it does kind of, you know...
It's almost like it's like if you earn your entitlement, then you can have
a little bit
that
of
pride or like something, right. You know, like I feel like I remember reading like a Mindy Kaling quote where it was like, yeah, I'm entitled because I earned it or something like, you know, it's not something you just walked into, but it's like, I've worked really hard to become this boss, so I'm gonna have like the pride that comes with it.
Yeah, and that's why I think people continue to be successful, because you want to be surrounded by people who do have that confidence. At least for me, I gravitate towards people who do have that like charisma or confidence, because it then makes me want to,
learn
take
from
that
them,
on,
aspire.
Yeah. So I like the spin on that of like, what's the difference between.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really interesting question, Krystal, because I thought about this topic. One of my male coworkers on a previous show, when we had a female-led, basically majority female department, he was saying, the best thing about the personalities, and, it might not just be because they're all women, but it's just these specific women, like, no ego. They just focus on getting the work done. It's not all about taking credit, being the hero, things like that. It's just about, we're all together pushing through, and like how things can just work so smoothly without those big personalities. And so a story, it's not my story, it's kind of a hearsay story about a big ego, is I've been hearing from coworkers about a certain boss who basically like, he would always want to be the hero, so he would set up people to fail, kind of like in ways where it was like miscommunicate things or not telling someone something, so it kind of ends up making someone else look bad, and he comes in and last minute swoops. And I don't know...
Rewrite the narrative a little bit.
Yeah,
yes.
And that is like a big ego thing, right?
Yes.
Could be considered...
It's exactly what you're describing. I've been a person on a team with
under that,
and it's
how do you manage?
It's not easy, and I would say I didn't manage it for a long time. I think there was a combination of things going on. I think there was the ego part of it. I think there was a lot of other elements at play, and I think for a while, me personally, just who I am, I took it very personally.
I think
like you start to believe things, or you start to, just because someone with an ego can kind of manipulate the situation, and like you were saying, they want to be the hero or the heroine in the scenario, and they put themselves on this pedestal. So you start to believe that you're not a person that can be...
You start doubting yourself?
You start doubting yourself, yeah. Oh. And so I will say I didn't deal with it well at all for a very long time. And then I think I started to see a little bit clearly that person was creating the situation. And it was all about them. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about the people around them. And so...
Did you figure that out by talking to other people who are kind of going through the same thing, or just where it's like, this keeps happening, it can't be me?
I think it was a little bit of talking to other people, definitely. I think it was also just observation. I really tried to be like, okay, let me take a step back. Is it really me, or is it the entire situation and what this person is, causing? Like being a little bit of a bulldozer and you seeing their impact on other individuals. I think that just put it into perspective of like, this is not personal. So I think with that particular individual, I learned how to set boundaries, it's and kind of say, realize that if they're changing the narrative, I'm going to have to figure out other ways to create my own narrative outside of it. So I started going outside of the confines of our team or confines of this narrative and going to the direct people that I knew I could make impact in other ways, I guess. Not being reliant on this one individual.
Yeah, I feel like that's how I deal with like the big egos, is like kind of working around them. The people who like use their position and their entitlement to like bulldoze. You just end up working around them to get things done. Yeah. But like, I guess, and Krystal, you too, have you been in situations where like there isn't really an option to work around and you're kind of under like a dictatorship?
Yeah.
No, not really. I mean, of course, there's been incidences, and I mentioned on the podcast, specific incidences that dealt with kind of a narcissistic personality.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I find it much easier for me to let those people, in hindsight, forgive them and, move on, because they have a lot of issues to work through.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the person who's dealing with them, but I know that they have a lot, and it really has little to do with me, even if they kind of make it feel like it's about you. Mm-hmm. I kind of put the even though, like, if they actually have that the onus sometimes is on the people that are with you, to speak out if there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And, I in this specific example, he was being enabled by the people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he was being enabled to continue to have a big ego.
Yep.
Because his art was beautiful. And it was, but one of the worst employees I've ever seen.
Yeah. There's usually
it kind of took me by surprise, being like, I was more managerial, like I was a lead artist, responsible employee, trying to do everything right. And then I realized, oh, wait, why am I doing this when I don't get the same opportunities? And I try to take that and learn from it, because when I see them, it's not like I want to be a slack off employee or anything like that, but at the same time, these people are being more selfish. Yeah. And if you can be just a little bit more selfish for yourself,
exactly,
you become the specialist that you want to be, and you'll get those opportunities.
Yeah.
Because there's a little bit more boundaries, there's a little bit more pushback.
Yes.
And people, I don't know, there's something that is associated with high performers and artists specifically that has a little bit to do with an ego.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think, you hit the nail on the head of the setting the boundaries, and I was starting to think of like you're kind of developing this respect. People start to see you, like that's what I started to do, and I kind of put me into I became a different person. I'm not going to lie, to figure out how to push back on this person. But I think once you start to define like where you're drawing the line in the sand, what your boundaries are, and once you start sticking that up, then that person's ego starts to deteriorate, or people start to see weaknesses in that, because you're pushing back on it a little bit, or you're defining like, this is who I am, I'm going to stick my ground, like I'm going to develop my own, persona and build
how I'm being treated
and decide that, and not let someone else decide that. So once you start taking a stand, that's when I started to see change.
And when you were talking about it, Krystal, like about, these artists who are not the lead or the supervisor or the boss, but they have these big egos, like that's a whole different level, is dealing with like the big egos like at the middle level, or like just not at the top level, but at other levels, because I've worked with similar artists, and like I took it really personally, just they would kind of come in and just expect everyone to do everything for them, expect someone to make their salad for them or things like that.
Got it.
And it was just like, it was a thing where you think it's about you, but like you guys said, it's all on them. Like the more you kind of dissect the person who's kind of coming off like he's like everything, he's the best, it's like, oh, but he also wears lifts in his shoes because he's, on the shorter side, and he dyes his hair, and he wears like $7,000 jacket.
There's a
where
reason.
It's like, okay, there's something going on in there.
Because they're building that narrative for them, but once you start to kind of break that persona or narrative, then they're not as strong as they're coming off.
Yeah.
And it's another thing you brought up, Krystal, that was kind of interesting is, people, there's reasons why people kind of let these people slide. So you mentioned an artist who's extremely talented. And I think of this boss or this manager that I reported to, and there was all these things, yet somehow he was a very smart person, and he always had an answer for things. And I think people kind of were like, well, there's all these great things about him. They always like try to weigh the pros over the cons. And it's interesting being, now that I've been in my career for almost 10 years and just seeing like how employers can be a little risk averse, or they're more concerned about the positive things and not focusing on the negative things that is impacting the team.
Well, I think part of it too is like my dad says there are these certain types that are kiss up, punch down, where it's like the people who kiss up to the people above, and they just work their people, they just punch everyone down, and to some extent, like, the upper people might not see
They don't see that.
They don't understand that.
So, but that's when going around, and it sounds bad, that's when change started to happen. So I think it was more of a grassroots movement of people who were kind of, like you said, like being punched down, started speaking up and started going to other sources around, and then at that point change happened.
I think also, so I've not like had situations like that because I feel like in my freelance world, we don't really have that structure, but I do remember having like a big ego personality I was working with who would like try to throw me under the bus whenever he could in emails, and he would come to meetings with other department heads, and he'd be like, all right, you dragged me here, like kind of just like this nasty attitude, and everyone was just like kind of just like roll their eyes behind their back, but he happened to hire a producer under him who just would not put up with it. And so when he would say that he got dragged here, she'd be like, dragged? You just walked from your office, like just kind of putting him in check a little bit, kind of diffusing the situation, which was amazing because I feel like before he was just like, oh, bless you. He was just like...
But taking accountability of like the people that are around you. I mean, just the same as like the Me Too movement. The accountability as people around you not to enable and just like let it be somebody else's problem. If of course, like they might be targeting one person more than other people, but bullying shouldn't be accepted. And sometimes it's just not worth the good work, like whatever you perceive as the good work, it's not worth dealing with that ego. Or more likely arrogance. And I have another pivot question for you guys. All of our stories revolve around men with egos. Do you have any examples of a woman with an ego in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more distant, but I do have experiences where it was more so like... It was like they thought their way was the right way and the only way and wouldn't really take input from people around them. It was almost like it was kind of different because it wasn't like, like...
That's more like a need for control.
Maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I don't think I've dealt with a female coworker or manager or anything that's had an ego. It's more of they're trying to grasp control, or there's ownership of something, or them even being intimidated. I think just women inherently react different in those situations where there's a little bit more competition, feeling like you have to prove yourself or feeling like you're not good enough. Like women always think they're not good enough, whereas men think they are good enough. And then that's where you start to see maybe a little bit more of the egos come into play.
I feel like it's like a different dynamic when you have like if you have a tough time with a female boss, it feels to me a little bit more like a situation where they want to deal with like being a taskmaster or being like obsessed with the minutia or something, because they are also multitasking. Probably they want things done a certain way, and it makes them feel safe. Just like I do that in my personal life in different ways. And I need things to be a certain way, and then that makes me feel safe. It seems a little bit different than just like, oh, I'm just gonna glide on into work whenever I want and do whatever I want, because no one will say anything to me because I'm producing enough value for the company that no one will say anything unless something outrageous happens.
Yeah. It's kind of like, we don't have that, like, natural instinct in us that, like, oh, I'm bringing everything to the table. Like that, we just don't, I feel like it's kind of like how when we go in to negotiate, it's like, we didn't even know we could ask for that kind of a thing, like...
I think it's just the work environment has been majoritively male-dominated.
That too.
And so I think just inherently that's been the result. And so men have been promoted, men have moved into these positions, and so it's created this culture where ego can be a little bit more okay or just allowed because they're in the same company. Maybe now that there's more and more women stepping into leadership and more women in the workplace, we're starting to see a little bit more defined ego, right? Or just issues with ego. In the past, I think men would just deal with it very differently of like, oh, I'm not going to work with that person. Because they also then have an ego. This person has an ego, but I'm also not going to work with that person, and they can have a little bit more of that direct request.
I feel like it's almost like, it seems like because men already have the big ego, it's like the women have to kind of quiet down to some extent, like tampered.
Because we also want to feel like a little bit like we are kind of societally pushed us into this mom role, and we'll just fix everything, and I'll just do it. Or I'll make it happen. And
exactly. Just go along with, I will say, now that I'm stepping into a leadership position, I'm trying to challenge that though. Like I don't put up with ego. I can't stand it. Like it's just not that I'm generally an optimistic, positive person. That's how I like to run a team or how I like to run projects. And so I think now with this role change, I'm trying to handle it differently than what I've seen before. I want to be open-minded. I want to create this positive environment, and I don't want to be the one that's like, I'm better than you. I want to create more than you. I know more than you, which I don't. Like, honestly, all the people on my team are brilliant, smart people, and they're there to get the job done. And so I think maybe more and more people that kind of challenge that norm of ego, hopefully will create more of that, positive environment.
Absolutely. I think that's the perfect way for a leader to lead their team. I also feel like I don't know anything. So the more and more I can learn, the better for me and for everybody. So it's not like I'm never going to say I know how to do everything or anything.
Exactly.
But because of that attitude, you probably do. Or you can figure it out.
Or you can figure it out, or you surround yourself with people who do know, and then you learn from those people. I think it's and maybe it's just women are more open to being okay with the fact that they don't know things, because we've
asking questions, asking for directions, anything like that. I was just in my current job, we were just talking about how, two people who left or who were let go just weren't willing to ask questions and just were instead kind of blindly forging through and making lots of mistakes and not really knowing how to do their job. And we were kind of like, I think they were afraid to talk to their boss. They were afraid to look dumb. And like, it ended up working to their disadvantage because they didn't figure it out and they were let go. And so it's kind of like, so we were just joking how like, it was both like a man and a woman who weren't really asking questions and didn't really make it through. But we're joking how typically it's usually men who are like, I know everything, I'm driving, I don't want to stop for directions, I'll figure it out, kind of a thing, like that ego inside.
Never admitting that they don't know something or pretending that they do know something.
That they don't.
Yeah.
And that's that bigger conversation about my favorite, Brene Brown talks about, which is just having vulnerability.
Yeah.
Let go of the armor. There's no point.
No point.
Yeah, absolutely, no point. I also wanted to bring up a nomination for someone in our group that I believe has a really healthy ego, and that's Norn.
Yeah.
I think she's an artist.
I think she needs a higher ego, actually. I don't think she understands just how talented she is.
Yeah.
And just how, like, prolific she is and will continue to be. You know, I feel like...
She also still continues to learn.
Yeah.
She tells me about these classes she's going to, things that she's inspired by, constantly taking in information, not thinking that she knows everything. But at the same time, the bleeding heart artist within us is also something where, you know, we are confident in our abilities. And, and she knows she can make things happen. You know, I think that's very healthy.
And I think part of that comes with experience, because I feel like for, you know, one of the first times in my career over the past like year or two, I've been like, I know what I'm doing, don't question me, or hey, you don't like what I'm doing, fire me, I'll get another job anyway.
It's not worth it.
Like, and I think it's something like, you know, before I used to be very accommodating in the way, being like, how do you want this, how should I do it, but now I'm kind of like, this is how I do it. So it is like, I feel like it's like kind of like earning entitlement is like earning your ego and earning that bit of self-confidence. And it is healthy, and you do need it, because at least for me, it's like if I have an interview for a job, I feel like I come in much more stronger now that I've worked on so many different shows and so many different places, and I can just be like,
you can ask for those things.
Hi, I'm the expert. Pay me what I want, and you know, if you don't want to, I'll move on.
It is really interesting, because I was talking to a mentee, and she's, you know, a few years just into her career, and she was like, you know, I don't know what I want. I don't know what to even ask my boss. Like, I was like kind of having this moment of like, I remember when I was in her shoes. When you're just starting out and you're like, you know, starry-eyed, working in production, and you're like, I want to do everything, but I also don't know what I want at all. And I think over time, as you get into your career, and I was telling her, like, try to focus on the things that you do want and be clear with your boss, because you'll get farther along, because your boss will then be able to help you get those things. But it takes a long time till you can develop that self-confidence. And I feel like
it's a muscle.
It is.
I think it's a muscle that you develop over time, and then when you have it, it's just like, how easy is it to, after you've done, I don't know, yoga or something for a while.
It's practice.
It's practice. It comes more naturally.
It's a practice for sure.
But I agree. I feel like Norn is so aspirational in many ways, but especially that where it's like, I always say my first story, when I moved and sat near Norn at our old workplace, I just heard her giving notes, knowing exactly her vision, and just like not apologizing, not, you know, making herself smaller. It was just like,
this is what I want. And this is how we're gonna do it. But exactly.
But not in a way that is sickening or you know, like putting people down or anything.
I was
not micromanaging. Like,
no. Exactly.
Giving them the direction, you figure out how to do it.
Well, like
I'm over here.
Exactly. And going back to kind of, you know, you hire people who are smart. You hire people to do the work. There's a reason for that. And if you're not relying on them to figure it out themselves, then what's the point of having those people on your team?
Exactly. It's like you need self-starters, or you want people who are better than you at other things.
Absolutely.
I think one thing I realized, and I think I heard someone have this quote, and I forgot who it was, but they said something like, oh, when you become a lead or manager of something, you realize, oh, not everyone can be a clone of me.
Oh my God. I was just saying this to Savanna, I think. I think it was Savanna. We were messaging or something where I was like, I had this moment where I was training someone and they weren't doing things the way I would do it, even though I was saying exactly how to do it. And I was getting so frustrated and disappointed where I'm like, how is she not doing this? And then finally one of my bosses was like, Ray, not everyone is you. You're special. Like, you can't expect your standards for everyone. And that's just a reality. Like, not everyone's going to do just like what you said.
Everyone learns differently.
Everyone does things differently. And some people just aren't wired, like, don't think the way you do. And it was such like a It was so dumb,
realization.
but yeah, it was like, you know, like you're straight out of college and you think everyone's like you, we're all like on the same page, but then it was just
not
like,
at all.
No,
There's
so many different
personalities.
Mm-hmm, and learning curves.
It's
and
fun.
Everything.
That's been an interesting, fun. It sounds weird, but it's like a fun challenge for me when I train new people and kind of figuring out what makes them tick or work, and like how can you take something that you know and apply it to something that in a way that they can, you know, learn. It is a challenge, but you do have to remember that people are different.
Yeah, and we can't expect everyone to do things just like us.
No, not at all.
And, you know,
yeah. I was thinking about egos too, and not just being in a situation where you're reporting up to someone, but I was also thinking about just like dealing with egos adjacently in production, because we deal with a lot of creatives, and a lot of those creatives have egos for good reasons, right? They are successful. They come up with these amazing things. And I was thinking about how I've learned to navigate those egos and treat it in a way as not a negative thing. Like, this is who this person is. How can I like navigate this to get what I need out of the situation? It sounds really weird, but for example, I deal with a lot of executive producers or whatnot, and they like their ego's pet. Like, it sounds
like they like their emails in a certain order.
And you know what? And I will do those things to end up getting what I need or want. And you kind of have to. It's a little bit of a game, and it's a little bit of a strategic thing. But once you figure out how a person ticks, then you start to you can develop a really good relationship. And I feel like that point you can then build that respect between one another. So I've encountered a lot of people in this industry that are very much like that, and I feel like you can learn to work with them.
I feel like it's like, I mean, it's tough though, because is it like, are we learning to work with them, or are we doing like what Krystal was saying earlier, where we're like kind of like letting them continue this behavior?
Yeah.
You know, like, because I get that kind of, there are moments like that, when there are, pardon?
And you have to also have your own boundaries.
Yeah.
Right.
I think as long as there's that balance, then that's okay.
As long as you keep yours.
Yeah, you're not sacrificing.
Keeping it in check, kind of. Where, because I think.
It's about relationships at that point. It's just like, I know this person really, really needs praise. Or I need,
exactly.
Or this person really wants to talk to you about their day first.
Right.
Before they can even engage.
No, it's so true.
Personalities like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I guess we can start to wrap it up, unless you guys have any other thoughts about big egos. Have you ever felt your ego ballooning or not within a situation?
I don't know if ballooning, but it's for like going through this transition of going from more of an individual contributor to leading a team. It is an interesting and a weird feeling for me, because you all of a sudden get put in this limelight or looked to, or all of a sudden everyone respects you automatically more, which is,
it's like being accountable in a different way.
Yeah, and maybe it's just just a different level of pressure and a different level of people see you, they look to you to guide the way, and when things go well, there's this moment of like excitement but I don't know if it's ego, but it is this interesting, like, I don't want to have an ego, but I also want to be confident. So it's, how do you, that's balance. What I think about that a lot is like, how do you balance that where you are coming off and, confident, but not crossing the line of going into the ego zone. So I do feel that, whatever that feeling is.
But I feel like you're being
an individual, like, that is the ego, and that it's your individual pride.
Yeah.
Blowing up, and you can kind of feel that. I mean, you feel little hits of dopamine, right? When
right. So you can't, you can't deny that. Like, you're not gonna be like, oh, I'm not. But yeah, it's I feel
weird. But you're like really trying to keep it in check.
Yeah, I want to keep it in check.
You're very hyper aware.
I'm hyper aware because I've been on the other side of it, and I don't want to be trapped in that.
Yeah, I don't feel like I get that many opportunities to be like having a big ego about my job, unless I'm just like, no, I know I sent that and you're wrong. But like, it's kind of like, I feel like my position is so supportive, it's such a mom kind of thing, that I more deal with the big egos than, and it's kind of like, maybe that's it too. It's like, because I'm dealing with them, I can't really have my own explosions as much.
But I think that's kind of your own ego too. You can deal with people like that.
Yeah.
Maybe. And maybe that's not a good thing, but you
But
could,
yeah,
you
yeah,
could
that's
say
kind of
that.
Yeah.
But you taking pride in your work is a little bit of that too.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I feel like the confidence I have now is definitely like my ego, but I feel like the only time it is overinflated is when I'm like, fire me, just fire me. You know, that's the only
I can't
time.
see that coming out of your mouth.
Well,
I like that, right?
I just, this is me working from home, just be like, they can fire me if they want, I'll find something else, I don't care. And then I'm like, hi, yeah, okay, anything you need, okay, yeah. But at least it's somewhere.
I love Ray's coming out of her shell right now. Like, oh my God.
Oh, you have no idea. You have no idea.
I can see the words boundaries just
Just pushing out
Yeah.
of me. But,
All right, well, I guess we'll wrap it up here. Thank you, ladies, so much for talking about.
Thanks for
big egos.
hosting.
I hope people find this helpful.
yes, I do too. So yeah, just know you can work around those big egos as long as you keep your boundaries.
Yeah.
Yep, keep your boundaries and, just remain, the social pressure of, the workplace is high.
Mm-hmm.
So, just navigate it the way you would any other situation and you'll gather that confidence as you go.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not you.
Yes.
Remember,
Most
it's
of
not
all,
you.
it's not you, it's
Not
them.
about you.
All
All
right.
right, everyone.
All right.
Flips out.
Bye.
Bye.
For more information, follow us on Instagram at Ladies in Prod Podcast, or you can email us at ladiesandprodpodcast@gmail.com.